Hello everybody, welcome to this afternoon's Speakers for Schools virtual talk. We're delighted so many students from across our school network have been able to join us today. This session will last around 45 minutes and will include a presentation followed by student submitted questions and answers. Questions for our speaker can be submitted via the Q&A function on the right hand side of your screen, and this will be open towards the end of the presentation for questions to be submitted. Unfortunately, we will not be able to answer all submitted questions today. We have several hundred questions submitted in any talk we organise, and there is simply not enough time to answer them all. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome this afternoon's speaker, Josie Rourke. Born in Salford, Josie read English at Cambridge University and is a theatre and film director. Josie has joined us today to talk a little bit about her career and about the creative industries. Josie, hi, welcome to your first virtual talk.
Hello, well, thank you. It's my first Speakers for Schools talk, so it's a very big moment for me, Carly. Thank you for a lovely introduction. It's great, and I hope everyone's doing really well and having a positive version of lockdown. I thought I'd begin by talking a little bit about what I've been doing in lockdown, which is obviously a weird time for someone whose job mainly involves being quite close to other people. That's either audiences in theatres or film sets tend to be quite close places. So I've got a bit of a presentation here. It's my first go at doing this, so bear with me. I just want to flag as well that I'm very, very concerned that my doorbell might ring and someone might deliver a bunch of flowers. So if that happens, we're just going to have to roll with it. Okay, here goes. So this is what I've been doing during my lockdown. I have been, let's see if this works. Yes, I've been directing Jodie Comer in a monologue by Alan Bennett. Just for anyone who's not sure, that is Jodie Comer on the right and Alan Bennett on the left. And Alan Bennett wrote these amazing monologues. So when I've been directing with Jodie over FaceTime, he wrote in the 1980s, and we found a way, and some of you may want to ask about this later, to direct them at home. Jodie did her own hair and makeup under the guidance of an amazing hair and makeup person, and about 10 days ago we shot it on the EastEnders set in Elstree with everyone staying 2 meters apart. So that was wacky and wonderful, and she's amazing in that. So I'm editing that at the moment. I've got to go and grade it tomorrow, which is when you colour and tone it. Basically it's a very high-tech version of an Instagram filtering system, and I've been up to that. I've also been planning a National Theatre Live broadcast of a production of Coriolanus with Tom Hiddleston and Mark Gatiss and a bunch of other great people that I did at a theatre I used to run called the Donmar Warehouse. And for anyone who wants to tune in, that will be on the National Theatre Live YouTube channel, which has been pretty great actually as a lockdown thing. And what I really wanted to show you is how many contrasts there are in the career of a theatre and film director, because obviously Shakespeare's Coriolanus and Alan Bennett's Talking Heads are quite serious. I've also been completing the edit on Catherine Tate's Nan movie, so that's been a big bit of my lockdown experience, as well as tidying out a lot of drawers and trying to cut my own fringe, which again you can let me know if that's been successful or not. So I was asked to think about my journey, and one of the things that it said was, what would my advice be for my younger self? So I thought really hard about this. And I asked my dad if he could send me to my parents' place a picture of my younger self. Here I am. Having my picture taken by the local paper. I was quite bookish. I think it's important to say I never read those books, and I don't think anyone in the history of our school read the World Book, which has been used to prop me on there. I mean, I think the first piece of advice to my younger self there would be don't pluck your eyebrows. In 30 years' time, they'll become weirdly fashionable. But I slightly overplucked. So if I could go back in time, because I'm quite a vain person, I think not to overpluck my eyebrows. That's not great career advice, but it is great advice. So I began by thinking about my journey in a very literal sense. So this is a picture from the 1980s of the bus that took me to school every day at St Patrick's RC High School in Salford. It's a great bus. It's the 66 bus. And I now realise how old I am because that looks really vintage. So I found a picture of the 66 and got a bit nostalgic. This is a picture of something that's a stark contrast to the not real glamour, I think we can say, of the 66 bus, which is a picture of the actor Margot Robbie and two other very great actors in the first film that I directed, Mary Queen of Scots. And as I was looking at a picture of Margot dressed up in this amazing costume, as Mary Queen of Scots, it struck me that that's quite a big journey from the 66 bus. And I think one of the things I wanted to talk about today is what the reality of working in theatre and film and the journey to get to work in theatre and film that can seem almost as glamorous as Margot looks in that picture and real life might be. So what's quite helpful in that is that Margot, as a wrap gift, which is what you give someone as a present when they finish shooting a film, gave me a pair of Ugg boots. They were not as exciting as these Ugg boots. They were a much more practical Ugg boot. In fact, I've got them on now. Don't know if everyone can see that. Those are my boots. And one of the reasons she gave me those boots is because what Margot is, a bit like me, is from what feels like a place that's quite a long way away from Hollywood. She's from the middle of Australia, and I remember her telling me that what she thought when she was a kid was the fanciest thing was to put on your Ugg boots that were really fancy and to go out for dinner. And that for a while was like the most glamorous thing that was happening in her life. I have to say, Margot is an amazing person at finding the reality in a situation. She's really practical. She's an actor. She's a great actor. She's also a producer, and she's very generous, as you can tell from the Uggs, and very sensible and straightforward. And I think that's a big key to her success. And there's a big contrast between this person that you meet when you're rehearsing them and this person that you see on a red carpet, although she is extremely sensible. And I was looking at this image yesterday and just wondered if whether or not she was sensible enough actually to have a pair of those Ugg boots, but in black, on underneath that dress right there. But who knows, that's just a side thought really. I was not sensible enough to wear Ugg boots to the premiere of Mary Queen of Scots, and this is a picture that I found of me collapsing at the end of the night. It's probably the most glamorous photograph anyone has ever taken of me, even with my now overplucked eyebrows. And this feels like quite a good example as I was looking at this, because this is in fact the reality of filmmaking. So this is also me in what's called a midge net, which is something that you have to wear if you visit the Highlands of Scotland at a particular time of year because the midges bite, and a cagoule, trying to find places to shoot the film of Mary Queen of Scots. And that is very much more the reality than the picture of me laying out on an expensive sofa. I would ask you to note, and I'm sure some of you really understand social media, that the one of me, the eagle-eyed of you will have noticed in the red dress is in a square, because I definitely put it on my Instagram. That took a very expensive hotel room, a dress I borrowed, 2 different people to do my hair and makeup, and a filter. In the photo that you can see to the right of that, it doesn't have a square. I did not post it on Instagram. No people helped me with my hair and makeup, although unbelievably it does have a filter on it. So yeah, that's pretty vain. So let's see. So this is an image that I found just to reflect, and I think it's really important for me to say that I came to filmmaking relatively late, not until I was in my early 40s. Up until that point, I'd only worked in theatres, and I'd worked my entire life indoors. Now that's partly, as you could probably guess from the photo with the books at the beginning, that I was not a particularly outdoorsy person, and I was just looking for some images yesterday to represent how bad I was at throwing and catching. We didn't have any images of me failing to catch a ball, but I did find this rather charming dog who is having roughly that good a time as I was, just being rubbish at sports. And one thing that I really realised, and I think I would say to my younger self, is that you always have the capacity to change. So I really, as we were doing those recces, as they're called, when you do reconnaissance to try and find places to shoot in Scotland, I realised that I wasn't fit enough, that I'd never worked outdoors, that I wasn't very hardy. And so I went on a bit of a mission to stop being like this dog, although this dog is clearly having a good time, and ran my first half marathon. That's me with my mate Ruth. Again, some of you will spot that I'm very impressed with myself, and that's in the square format from my photos. I posted this on Instagram because I think I'm a great way, but it was a really big deal. And actually, I taught myself as not a physical person at all to do that. I had to teach myself a lot of stuff to direct a movie, but that was probably the biggest thing. I think it's fair to say that my family, big influence on my life, I love them very much, were more impressed with me running a half marathon than anything I have ever achieved across theatre and film. And that standing ovation represents that. Just to give you a sense of how unimpressed they are by some stuff, this is the text message that I got from my mother when Mary Queen of Scots was nominated for 2 Oscars. So you can see up there on the right, Auntie Lou and Uncle Neil, very proud of you. Auntie Fran, wowzers. My mother, big snow in Chilterns, was her response. Although in fairness, it was actually very snowy in the Chilterns that day. Which is not to say that I don't really love my family and would be nowhere without them. That's my mum and dad. And my mum's a teacher and was massively supportive. And I think one of the key things is that they never told me that I couldn't do anything. And although they do mock me relentlessly and keep me in an Ugg boot way very grounded, what I do have is enormous support from my folks. And it might be that you're as lucky as I am and have these amazing parents who really urge me on to try stuff that people in my family had never tried before. It may be that you need to find that somewhere else in your life and can find it from friendship or from teachers or from other places. But I think one of the things I would say to my younger self is celebrate where you get your confidence from. And sometimes that's yourself and sometimes it's your folks. It's also very much down to my family to keep me grounded. That is my brother pulling a sarcastic face at me, although it turns out it's genetic because that's his 1-year-old daughter. Who is similarly sceptical about some of the mad things I try. And I think a big part of my job is about trying mad things. So it's very much about keeping the balance between this kind of enthusiasm and this kind of skepticism in the work that I do. Back to the 66 bus and back to that journey. So the 66 bus, the end of the bus route, was the Manchester Royal Exchange Theatre, which is an amazing theatre in the round. It's so exciting. As you can probably see from that image, some of you might know it really well. The audience get to sit on the stage. You're really close to the action. And it was definitely where I fell in love with theatre. What I wasn't thinking at that point is that I could be an actor, which is the first thing that you see, because that's what you see in front of you. I mean, you see costumes and set, right? But you don't often think, oh, I could make that costume or design it or make that set or design that set or direct the play. The director's kind of invisible. And I think I had enough self-knowledge to know that I was roughly as good as acting as that dog that we saw before was at catching. So it didn't really occur to me that it was a job, but I loved it. My parents really encouraged it. I was very bookish, as we tell from the books. And as Carly said at the start, I went to Cambridge University. That's the Wren Library in Trinity College, where I went for my interview. No one in the history of my school had been to Oxford or Cambridge. And actually, full confession, I had a really disappointing interview process. I had someone who was a bit snobby, who was interviewing me and very much gave some of those looks at some of the things that I said. But that was okay because I'd seen those looks from my family before and knew how to deal with them. Made a bit of fun of my accent and made me feel a little bit like I was wearing my Ugg boots, which I've now grown to love. And also made me feel a bit like this, which we'll come on to later. This is a picture of everybody in history, actually it's missing this year, who have won an Oscar for Best Director. And someone has rather brilliantly, with this picture, coloured everyone who is a man or male in grey, and the one woman in history to win an Oscar for being the Best Director, Catherine Bigelow, in colour, just to show how stark that was. So I was feeling a little bit sort of, not like Catherine Bigelow, but out on a limb, in my Ugg boots, bit of scepticism. But this very much in terms of finding where my confidence was and being able to laugh at the situation and laugh at myself, got me through, and I got into Cambridge. So that's just there. So 66 bus, back 66 bus, back to Cambridge, had a fantastic time. I think because of a combination of amazing family, great friends, meeting great peers. One of the things that was really evident to me from that time, I mean, look at that piece of architecture, is the extraordinary ambition of that building. But I think what I discovered, and I've actually spent most of my life discovering about buildings and places, is that you don't have to own it in order to take possession of it, that it doesn't have to be yours in order for you to find your place in it, that sometimes architecture is constructed to impress and intimidate. And actually, it's really, really important to work out how you celebrate yourself within that context and where you see yourself within that picture. And I think a combination of everything on the 66 bus route at that point meant I had a simply fantastic time at Cambridge and would unreservedly recommend it to anybody. It's certainly where I started directing theatre for the first time. So I left Cambridge and I had a decision to make. I went back to Manchester and worked off some debts, but it became very apparent that if I wanted to try and get a start in the theatre, I think this is less true now actually, and we can talk about that later, I need to try and go to London, which I've represented brilliantly. You can tell I'm an award-winning theatre director by using 2 pictures of 2 buses, one from London and one from Manchester, but you get the idea. So I moved to London. I wish I could tell you that I fought crime by night like Batman, but in fact what I did by night was work as a secretary, now called a personal assistant. I was called a secretary back then, spending my nights photocopying in a bank, and I did theatre stuff during the days. I left university with a chunk of debt and I had a bunch of it to work off, but that felt in the end doable and I really knew what I wanted to do. So I was very fortunate that I was applying for a lot of stuff, and this man on the right here, not Daniel Craig, the man on the right is Sam Mendes, who directed Daniel Craig in Skyfall, gave me my first proper job, which was as resident assistant director at the Donmar Warehouse. And that's a traineeship scheme, which still runs. Anyone can apply for it with the right level of experience. And it's one of a load of apprenticeships that exist in theatre, film and television. And that was my amazing apprenticeship. So I trained for a year there with some fantastic people. And then I went to become a freelance director and was given some brilliant opportunities. Talking of architecture, it's intimidating. One thing I noticed when I was looking for images of the Rourke, the Donmar Warehouse, the Crucible Theatre in Sheffield, and the Young Vic Theatre, is that the Royal Shakespeare Company doesn't appear to have its name on the side of the building in most of the photos where it exists. I suppose it's the only theatre in Stratford-upon-Avon, so that's kind of fine. But I was lucky enough to work at a great range of places over a great range of plays for about 5 years. And then I got an appetite to do something a bit different. So I decided to become an artistic director. So it was back to the less glamorous for a while. I was the artistic director of this theatre here. Now, the blue building at the bottom is an O'Neill's pub. Just above that, you can see there's a room full of blacked out windows. That is no longer, the Bush Theatre on Shepherd's Bush Green, which is one of the original pub theatres. In the 1970s, when censorship was still a thing, a lot of little theatres sprang up that became clubs. So you buy a ticket and part of your entry to the theatre with that ticket would be like a club membership. It'd only be like £1 or something, but you get to see plays that were uncensored by the government, which plays were censored by the government up until the mid-1970s in this country. And that was one of those original theatres. It's quite a rickety building. In fact, the ceiling fell in and we had to move it around the corner. That's quite a long story, and it was a big adventure as well. But I really enjoyed running this theatre. And although it looks very, very humble, I think as a little room above a pub, I think one of the key things I would say in a younger self sense is that as long as you're around amazing people making amazing work in any place or in any platform, that it's about finding your peers. If you have the appetite to be an artist or a maker or a producer, that's the real thing. Because over the course of the 5 years that I ran this theatre, it was a theatre for new plays. Some of the writers who came through there have recently written these things. So Jack Thorne wrote his Dark Materials adaptation for the BBC. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who was writing and also acting, I directed her in a play in that room that you just saw, obviously, is the creator of Killing Eve, and the brilliant James Graham, actually, whose play that's very good, This House, will also be available on the NT Live platform, wrote Quiz, if anyone saw that, around the beginning of lockdown. Pretty fantastic writers who began their careers at the Bush Theatre. So I then moved on to take over the Donmar Warehouse Theatre, which was where I had done my training. A big fuss was made at the time because I was the first woman in the history of theatre who was also a director rather than a producer to run a major London theatre. That's it's slightly too long a sentence to be truly impressive. And actually, if I'm really honest, what it felt like more than anything else is that I was 34 when I got that job, which probably seemed quite old to you, but was quite young to be running a big theatre. So the main feeling and the truthful internal feeling was that I was too young to be doing the job, not too much of a woman to be doing the job. But people don't always see that. And I think, again, in the advice to younger self thing, sometimes a bit of honesty about what is actually intimidating you or what you're really feeling inside, in order that you can actually reasonably deal with your fears and your ambitions, was helpful to me. So I did some fancy plays there in which people wore some fancy costumes. We also did some amazing work that was about Shakespeare and representation. So one of the things I'm proudest of is that we did an all-female Shakespeare trilogy with a company of amazing women. And it was tremendous, and went to New York and has been broadcast around the world, and I think you can still get hold of it, and you should definitely watch it because it's fantastic Shakespeare. So that was really exciting. I think mainly because there are really good people wanting to improve representation in film, partly because I'd done some exciting stuff at the Donmar, and also because of my work with fancy costumes. I was then asked if I wanted to direct a feature film. It didn't begin as big as Mary Queen of Scots eventually ended up. And I think that probably the most important thing I was thinking about what got me there is this image here. And this is a really important image to me. So all of these people in this image are artistic directors. And the people on the top, who are in grey, are 3 brilliant men and amazing directors who all gave me jobs at those places and theatres that I showed you before. The people at the bottom of the picture are the new generation of artistic directors. And Lynette on the left is running the Bush Theatre that I used to run. She trained us at the Donmar. Kwame, who's running the Young Vic, was our associate at the Donmar Warehouse. That's just Tamara on the right there, who's an amazing woman who is the director of English National Ballet, because I just wanted to give a shout out to dance in this moment. Again, not a dancer, but that's been a big part of my work over the past few years, working with amazing choreographers. So I think the world's really changed. And I think in getting to direct Mary, yeah, it was about what I could do, but it was also about a desire for change and me harnessing people's wish to hear different voices, at this moment mine, represented. And that's there, and that opportunity is massively there, I think. So I just thought I'd show you that because it's kind of great and fun. So Mary Queen of Scots became, and I can talk a bit if anyone's got a question about how the project grew, but just became this absolutely enormous feature film. It began with the amazing Saoirse Ronan on the left, who'd been signed on to play Mary for a very long time, and actually adding a great writer to the project. And at that point, me saying I thought that Margot Robbie was the person who should play Elizabeth I, when she was mainly known for Wolf of Wall Street and Suicide Squad, and people didn't necessarily associate her with that role, was, I think, because most films are commercial, what got that film made. It's a massive, massive leap for me. And I think it's really important to say, although everything that you've seen in terms of my 66 bus to fancy costumes at the Donmar Warehouse journey was what earned me the confidence and other people's confidence in me to ask me to do that. On my part, there was a huge amount of quiet graft. So I spent pretty much every weekend watching tutorials on YouTube about how to direct films, because I'd never done it before. And there's an amazing amount of information that didn't exist when I was at school about how to acquire skills and how filmmaking works. And, you know, if you want to know how a lens works or a camera works, there's loads of stuff that is there for free at different levels. And although a lot of people, I think, wanted to believe that I'd done a fancy course and had amazing mentoring, I think probably the most helpful thing was watching a lot of YouTube, just from smaller filmmakers and students who spent their weekend making a video about their studies and jumping on the back of their studies. So I did this thing because I thought often it's the kind of glamour of Margot, or even sometimes a kind of minor glamour of me as I Instagram my half marathons and lying out on a sofa having my hair and makeup done, that we think of when we think of film. But I started just this little exercise, which is I went into the IMDb listing for Mary Queen of Scots and just started to, which you can do, and just started to like cut and paste everyone who was involved with it. And I think I always say this about theatre, it's very true of film as well. There is a job in theatre and film for everybody. Whether you are a visual effects person who would like to sit at a computer all day and work at a monitor and is interested in graphics or coding or programming, whether you're a driver and you want to drive people to set, if you love hair and makeup and you want to choose one of those teams, if you're a musician, if you want to cast stuff rather than be cast in stuff, There is someone in the costume and wardrobe department on this movie who just did the crochet, and she did it for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's absolutely beautiful, but that was just her job for a big chunk of time. And look, I mean, there are pages and costume makers, camera and electrical, which is a really cool job. You can do post-production, you can edit, you can cut movies. One of the best jobs, I think, is location management, where you go around the country and find cool places to shoot things and negotiate with people to do that. They're like very outdoorsy. Definitely when I was with my midget on jumping around the Highlands, that was a big bit of that. And yeah, just page after page after page. And what they're effectively there is roll the credits at the end of a film, which is a really good way to look at jobs that you might want to do. And I just wanted to show you an example of that, because I think it's really important to me today that I'm not just here to go, you can be a director if you want to, which you absolutely can. And I've got loads of practical advice about that. But there are so many jobs in this medium that feel so glamorous and so distant, really good kind of muscular, decent, great jobs. And so I suppose if you take one thing away from this, please think of it as an industry that is there for you, you can get employed in, and that has a place for you, even if you can't throw and catch. Cool, that's me, Carly, how's that?
That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Josie. It was really fantastic to see the journey that you've been on, I guess, from your time at school to where you are today, but also to see those amazing kind of plethora of different roles that exist in film, from crocheting to location management, which is fantastic. So I think you're absolutely right that it's not just about being on stage or in front of camera. There's so many dozens of jobs which make the whole endeavour practical and possible, which is really exciting to be able to see. So we have a few questions from students now, if that's okay.
Great.
Fantastic. So to get us started, you've been asked who or what has inspired you throughout your career. I know you spoke about your parents giving you fantastic confidence and never telling you there was something you couldn't do, but is there, was it your parents who inspired that kind of that confidence in you, or were there others who have done that throughout your journey as well?
And also responding to Oscar nominations with Big Show It Snow in the Chilterns. I think it's really important to remember that the keeping it real thing is quite profound as well. Yeah, loads of people have inspired me. I mean, designers inspire me on a literal level. So to work with a production designer, a costume designer, a hair and makeup designer, what you do as a director is you tap into the skills of people who are more skilled at their specific thing than you are, and more creative and have more ideas. And the great joy of that is that amazing dialogue that you get to have back and forth. And, you know, when you start a process with a production designer, often you'll start by just looking at paintings or sculpture or random images, or you'll find a really great book of photography. Or, you know, just looking early stage, I've got the most random collection of art books. And really, if you broke into my house, they would make no sense. They only really make sense by the projects that I've done. And so we, at a very practical level in theatre and in film, are really hungry for inspiration from the designers we work with, particularly, I would say.
Fantastic. And another part of that question is, did anyone ever stand in your way of your achieving your dreams and of what you wanted to do?
Loads of people. I know you had the Arts Council on this morning. When I took over the Bush Theatre, and this is not personal, the Arts Council, for reasons they've been planning from way before me taking over, tried to cut the theatre's funding, which would have closed it down. And I like to say you wouldn't have had Killing Eve if that had succeeded, but that's probably not true. But what was really amazing in that moment is that I had to learn how to be political, find key members of the local council, find MPs, work out how committees worked out how the Arts Council was run and controlled, and really research and understand a bit more what politics and funding was. I mean, you know, I've not spoken about that bit of being an artistic director, but you are also very responsible. Theatres on the whole are not businesses, they're charities. So you're responsible, like Speakers for Schools, you're responsible for the running of the charity and making sure that there's enough income, be that from the government, from ticket sales, from donors. So yeah, that was a big old impediment at the start of my first artistic directing job. But, you know, again, to go back to my strange, I learned to direct films by watching YouTube. What was really helpful was just researching and trying to work it out. And I think the key thing about my mum, and maybe this is like a northern mum quality, I don't know, is that she just talks to people. Like, she talks to people in the queues for shops and when she bumps into them, and you know, she's just extremely warm. And I think that one thing that has been really helpful is just, for some reason, that removed my anxiety about picking up the phone and asking a question. And on the whole, people quite like being asked questions. I'm quite enjoying this now. It makes me feel quite swizzy and clever. So they tend to be quite flattered by it, really. And that was a big way to get over that impediment, I would say.
Fantastic. One of our students has actually asked whether you think YouTube is a good way to get into filmmaking, so kind of creating short films and sharing them there.
Definitely, you know, and there are loads of short film competitions as well. You know, I mean, I'm so old, the internet didn't exist when I was the age of most of you watching this talk, so I couldn't just Google short film competition. But there are tons of them, and there are loads of opportunities. I mean, get to a point where you feel like your work is good enough to share. I think the one thing I would say, the Bush Theatre was a theatre for new plays. At the point at which I was running it, we'd have around 2,000 plays a year submitted for production, and we produced 6. Now, those are horrible odds, but the good ones really do come through, and it's really evident. So, you know, this is a good time to take your time with your material and really hone it and experiment, and make sure that what you put out into the world is something that you're really proud of.
Fantastic. And Amelia asks, what is your favourite part of directing?
I think rehearsing. Most directors say that. I say this is a little bit tragic, but I say that directing a play is a bit like being Andy in Toy Story. So when you're in the rehearsal process for it, you're kind of playing with the actors, and you sort of think that you're one of the toys. And then when the play's up and running, you open the door of the dressing room and they're like, so that bit of sort of playing and messing about goes away, and you feel a bit frozen once the show is running. In a way, that's why I like doing loads and loads of projects, because I like to keep that thing going.
Fantastic. And Archie asks, which projects are more difficult to work on in your opinion? A drama like Mary Queen of Scots or a comedy like Nan?
Hi Archie. I would say it's much easier to be, everyone says this, but it's true, it's much easier to be sad than it is to be funny. It's much easier for me to make you cry than it is for me to make you laugh.
Fantastic. That's such an interesting point, actually, and I have to absolutely agree. And we have another question. Thank you. Here. Jake asks, Jake says he's an aspiring actor, and so could you share any insights or information that would help an aspiring actor on stage, whether that's overcoming kind of confidence or you know, forgetting lines or anything like that, but any top tips and advice perhaps?
Yeah, loads of top tips. I would say that again, it's a bit like the sort of filmmaking thing. There's loads of really great stuff of actors talking about their craft on YouTube, online. Like most actors, when they get to a certain level of being established, like do a book or someone does a book about them. I really love actor biographies, but that's just, you know, me being really nerdy. But on a really practical level, just finding out about the experience of other actors. You know, I think whenever I've seen an actor have a massive wobble, like it's your job to help them as a director, but often the thing that really steadies them are the people who are opposite them in the play and whose eyes they look into every night on stage. So build great relationships with your fellow actors so that when you look in their eyes, if you are having wobble on stage, they don't totally blank you.
That's a really great idea. That idea of teamwork as well, and being able to work together. Someone else has submitted a question here, which is it necessary to begin work in theatre to eventually work in film?
No, absolutely not. It's actually, there's a kind of weird thing where it has been the case that a number of film directors have come from theatre, like Sam Mendes, who I referenced before, Stephen Daldry, Phyllida Lloyd. But, you know, Steve McQueen, who's probably one of our top, well, yeah, he's probably one of our top, if not our top British director, began life as a visual artist. You know, people come from lots of different backgrounds. Some people go straight into it. You know, some people go into it via making ads. Some people go in via telly. little known fact that Tom Hooper, who directed The King's Speech, that he won an Oscar for, and Les Miserables and Cats, began his directing career on Byker Grove, which was a BBC children's TV soap.
That's fantastic. Another question here is, I know you mentioned that you were quite bookish in school. Was there a childhood book that really inspired you, I guess?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was very, very bookish. So there's an amazing book that I'm thinking about reading again, which is a book by, it's not a kid's book, it's an adult book, but it's a great read called I, Claudius by Robert Graves, which is about it's actually it's not unlike Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall in terms of it's a kind of rise of an unlikely figure to become intensely powerful. And it's just a brilliant, I mean, I've not read it since I was 14, but it's a brilliant, brilliant historical thriller. And I think it's probably, as a kid, the book I remember thinking had the most exciting story. And, you know, if I go, I think I was drawn in the end more to story and drama than I was to work that's more lyrical. I guess that's one of the things that told me that.
Fantastic. And is there any advice that you were given at school that you still kind of hold on to today or still carry it with you in your career?
There's some stuff I was told that I ignore and sort of make it, I think that's not fair, actually. I had some absolutely amazing teachers who were really, really encouraging and gave me extraordinary confidence. And, you know, I was like really into German, and we had this amazing German teacher who like gave extra classes after school and that kind of thing. And I think I was just really inspired by their dedication to their subject. And, you know, I was very bookish and I was very studious. And actually I had a teacher who told me just to sort of not pay too much neurotic attention to detail, like not get really upset if I got something a bit wrong. And I found that really useful because I think, particularly as a woman director, one of the things that allows you to deepen your craft, as we call it, is to sort of resist perfectionism and to enjoy the flaws and the mistakes in things, and to not always try and please people and be a good girl. So I had some teachers who were good at advising me not to do that. I had some other teachers who told me not to ask so many questions, and I have ignored that pretty steadfastly.
Excellent. Daisy has a question which is proving very popular on our thread, which is, what makes an actor stand out to you in the casting process?
Hi, Daisy. So I think the important thing to say is that not every actor is right for every role. So if you can be 100% the greatest actor in the world and not the right casting for something. So it's really important. It's a tough job acting in that respect, to understand that someone who might not have all the skills that you have might have the right quality for a part and therefore get cast. That's one of the things that's kind of tricky and cruel about it, actually, as a profession. I think that the thing that really has made extraordinary actors stand out to me is a lack of vanity and a preparedness to search for the feeling, the emotion, the moment without checking how they look. You know, everyone's really familiar with that at the moment because we're doing so much stuff on FaceTime. It's a real challenge not to look at yourself in the box, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's like a thing like, don't look at my face. I'm like, honestly, it takes every bit of my strength not to go, what have I done to my fringe? So actors who don't go, what have I done to my fringe, as they're trying to act, I would say that's probably, or the kind of metaphorical equivalent of that. That's
I think we'll all be much better at thinking like that after staring at ourselves on screens for so long during lockdown. So I think
it's a weird thing, isn't there, about I made this show, this is about 5 years ago now, about privacy. And I went to Boston to interview this woman who's an expert in actually artificial intelligence and how tech affects people emotionally. She's also a psychotherapist. And one of the things she points out is that it's really hard to be authentic when you're on a kind of video call or a phone call, because in order to look into someone's eyes, you have to look at the lens, which means that you're not looking into their eyes. And there's something really odd about that at the moment, I think. So yeah, anyway, it's a complete side point, but I suppose that's quite a good point if directing or the visual is something that you're interested in, just to, even within lockdown when we can't go out and see the world, just to keep observation going all the time, you know, and just, I'm about to say stay alert, that's hilarious, but you know, and just try and find different ways to stay alive to the world, I guess.
Fantastic. And just thinking about your own kind of journey, and you mentioned that you moved down to London to kind of be able to work in the theatre. Do you think that's something that young people will need to think about today, or do you think that theatre is more accessible in different parts of the UK now?
Yeah, I think it's much more accessible in different parts of the UK. I mean, I think I was lucky enough a few years back to do a show at the Manchester International Festival, which is just the most amazing thing. And there's been some explosive happenings in theatre in Manchester through MIF, but also with the building of Home, and, you know, the Royal Exchange extending its reach, and like really cool stuff has been happening. So I think the debate I had with my family about moving to London would be a much harder one to have now. That's not to say that there isn't and hasn't been more recently a concentration of wealth and theatres and artists in London, but more and more people are actually around Salford because of the BBC. And I think that one of the positive things that will come from this period of extraordinary life we're all living through is that there will probably be a greater redistribution of talent. You know, it will become less imperative to live in the centre of London.
Fantastic. And just thinking about your passion for what you do, you seem to be so passionate about your work, which I think is absolutely fantastic for us all to be able to see and engage with. Do you have any advice for young people who might not know what their passion is or where that lies, and how, any tips to help them figure that out, I guess?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I suppose that's one of the reasons why I cut and paste 87 things from IMDb at the bottom of my presentation there. You know, I think that, I mean, I would say this from kind of advertising my own industry, but I think like film in particular, theatre as well, is a really good way of just thinking about who you are, because one of the wonderful things about working in it is the identity of people within the organisation of a film. The project of a film is so massive, and you get so many different personality types as well. You know, you have a production accountant. I say that my father's an accountant, you know, or was before he retired, as well as the very glamorous actors or stunt people, or, you know, the amazing thing about film is there's something that answers every talent. So like a good exercise is just to go through the credits of a film and go, can I see myself doing any of those jobs? Like, which one of them feels like it would fit me? Because often I didn't start directing at school. It wasn't really an opportunity that was on offer. You know, you could be in a play, but you couldn't direct a play particularly. And certainly that's uniquely the thing that I am suited to within that process. So I came to it much later, and it does really suit my skills because I really like people. I really like assimilating and balancing different talents. I think I'm a great enthusiast about what other people can do better than me. And I really love communicating. So like, that's a perfect job, but I didn't find that until I was 19, you know. I think I thought I was going to be like a lady academic with one of those bicycles with a basket on the front. Actually, I've got one of those, but and write detective novels or something. I don't know. I didn't know. So I think it's okay not to know, and I think it's also okay. I mean, I know that a theatre director and a film director, it feels quite close, but it's not, and a lot of people don't make that shift. And I didn't do that until I was 40. You know, I think it can take a long time to work out where you're happy, and also the balance of your life will shift. You know, contents will not necessarily settle during transit, I don't think. So openness and curiosity, I would think, are the best things. And, you know, try my film credits exercise. You don't have to try it with Mary Queen of Scots. You can try it with John Wick 3 Parabellum. I don't mind, but try it.
Fantastic. I think that's a really great task to set our students to work on this week, perhaps, and have a think about the roles that would interest them. And unfortunately, that is all we have time for today. But thank you so much for joining us, Josie. It really is appreciated. It was an absolutely fantastic session, and I think it was so excellent to hear more about your journey and your story, and to be able to share that with our audience of hundreds of young people is absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much for making the time to be with us today. And
can I say thank you, hundreds of young people, for watching. It's certainly the most people who have seen my house for quite some time. Do watch Coriolanus. It's online for free from June the 4th. We will find some fun way, either on Twitter or Instagram, just to add some content to that and to have the cast be present and talk about that process. So if you want a bit more insight, that'll be available around that time. And yeah, check out Jodie Comer's Talking Head monologue when it's on the BBC. She is amazing. There you go. That is relentless plugging. Also, what's not often on the credits for film are like the people who do like marketing and the social media and all of that. Those are also jobs. So yeah, that's my passing thought. Thank you so much, Carly. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Cheers.
We've also shared a feedback form in the Q&A thread, so if viewers could complete that, that would be fantastic. And if you're
about the eyebrows.
And if you're completing the student activity sheet for your school, the colour for today's talk is plum. And we look forward to seeing you for future talks. Thanks, everybody.